Welcome to the State Legislative Candidate Forum, featuring candidates seeking office in the Indiana General Assembly, both running for the State House and the State Senate. One of our participants cannot be here today. That is Senator Mike Bohacek. He did have a flight canceled, but he did express an interest in a possible one-on-one debate. So we'll follow up with him and with Leon about that possibility. So stay tuned on that. We'll probably post that closer to the port, given where that district is located. But we certainly appreciate you making the trip tonight down to South Bend. This is for candidates who have some portion of their district in St. Joseph County. So New Carlisle voters who might be in that Senate District 8, for example, would be part of the League of Women Voters of South Bend area, which really covers all of St. Joe County. I'm Elizabeth Bennion. I am the Director of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters, as well as the Director of the American Democracy Project here at IU South Bend. And I am delighted to moderate this evening's forum. We told candidates that they'd have about 60 seconds just to tell you why they're running and what their top priorities will be if they are elected. So we'll start with that. There's a timekeeper here in the front, candidates, just so we get to as many topics as possible. And then we'll go through a series of policy questions of interest to Indiana voters. And we'll start with Leon Smith, and then we'll go all the way back around to Melissa, sort of on the order we have them on the screen there. Mr. Smith, to you, why are you running, and what is your top priority if elected?
Well, my name's Leon P. Smith. I'm a communication engineer and a software programmer. And I come from a civically minded family, and I have thought about running for a long time. And I want to give all public teachers in the state of Indiana a raise, a substantial raise. And I want to make sure that every school is adequately funded. All public schools are adequately funded. And math education is a pet issue of mine. I really want to see computer programming used to teach mathematics and mathematics used to teach computer programming, because they shed a lot of insight into each other, and I'd like to see both of those topics sort of be one integrated topic. And I am running to not ever sell out anybody's rights to further my own political career.
Thank you. All right, we go next to Libertarian Tim Cotton, running in Senate District 10.
Hi, my name's Tim Cotton. I'm also the county chair for the St. Joseph Libertarian Party. So I was born and raised in northern Indiana. I grew up in Warsaw, but I left for the military and I worked various jobs before coming back to Indiana. I'm running for Indiana Senate because I believe that the government should be the servant to its people, not its master. I stand for lower taxes, property rights, and educational freedom. Values that respect personal liberties and foster economic growth. My experiences in the military taught me the importance of discipline, commitment, and serving others, values that I carry with me today. I envision an Indiana where businesses thrive because of lower taxes, where homeowners truly own their own property, and we're free from excessive taxation. So my campaign is built on the principle of quality over quantity. We need quality policies that provide real solutions, not just more government intervention. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Heidi Beidinger. Hopefully I said that correctly.
You did. Hello, my name is Heidi Beidinger, and I'm running to be your next Indiana State Representative for District 5, which includes Granger, Mishawaka, and Osceola. My parents immigrated here to the United States. My mother was born in the Netherlands, and my dad was born in Austria. And they grew up there during World War II. They moved here to South Bend separately, and they both happened to join bowling leagues, and they ended up meeting at the Chippewa Bowling Alley on the south end of South Bend. And it was love at first sight. They fell in love, got married, and had my sisters and I. And the stories that we grew up with, there was always these three values that were woven through all of these stories, and that is, it's always about family, community, and empathy. We take care of each other. Here in Indiana, our legislators have legislated us to the bottom of nearly every metric measuring family, quality of life, environment, and education, and so forth. Our legislators have forgotten about family, community, and empathy, including my opponent. My top three issues are economy, women's right to choose, and public education. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we turn to District 6 candidate, Charlie Florance.
Good evening. My name is Charlie Florance, and I'm the candidate for District 6, which embraces South Bend and a little bit of Mishawaka. And the sole reason I'm running is to bring direct democracy to the Indiana legislature. And what that means is I want to hear every Hoosier's voice who wants to be heard on every issue that matters. And the reason why I think that's important is outside of the grandstanding posturing, I think there's more that we're similar on than what we're different on. And I think the more we hear from the people in our community, the better decisions we'll make as a legislature. I'm a retired Army infantry officer. I started the Indiana Whiskey Company, and I always think that there's a better way to do things. And I think we have the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, now we turn to Melissa Kauffman, who's running in House District 21.
Saving the best for last. My name is Melissa Kauffman. I'm running in District 21, Indiana House. I grew up here in northern Indiana, not lived anywhere else. I'm running because I believe that there is an opportunity that we can put voices back in our state legislature that haven't been heard. And there's too much bickering, much the way we pointed out. We don't spend time working together. And if we could work together, share ideas, come up with good philosophies for a result that benefits everybody instead of just particular groups. My top priorities are judicial reform, DCS reform, both are broken systems that have been long needed to be repaired, and term limits across the board.
Okay, thank you. All right, as we move into the questions, we will alternate the order of first response. And you don't need to applaud, you can applaud again after closing statements. So we'll go first in this case to Tim Cotton, Senate District 10. And that question will be, what is the first bill you would champion in the 2025 legislative session that you would introduce or champion, and why that one?
Well, the first bill that I would champion is significant reduction of property taxes for homeowners in Indiana. This reflects my position of own your property and ditch the tax. Career politicians have allowed property taxes to rise unchecked, burdening families and threatening, the American dream of home ownership. The bill isn't just about financial relief, it's about restoring true ownership. You should not have to pay rent to live in your own property at the risk of losing it if you don't pay your landlord. So the goal is to ensure that every Hoosier can live securely without fear of being taxed out of their home. So this legislation would directly improve the lives by promoting fairness and financial freedom, and that aligns with my goal of quality over quantity.
Thank you. Heidi Beidinger, District 5.
The first bill that I would champion and work to pass would be pre-K education. I want to see universal pre-K here in this Indiana. When you look at the data and the research that is associated with pre-K, the student achievement outcome soars. It gives kids a leg up. Not only so in Indiana, what are we always talking about? We're always talking about how kids are not being successful on the test. But if we have pre-education universal for everyone, we could get a leg up on that. There's also another reason why we want to do that, and that is because pre-K would also help offset some of the childcare issues that we have in this state. Childcare has become unaffordable for families. But if we had universal pre-K, then parents would be able to have their children in school, and then they wouldn't have to pay for that childcare. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie Florance, District 6.
Well, luckily I can lean on my counterpart in the Senate, Tim Cotton, to do a property tax bill. That's what I would have done. But number 2 would definitely be getting referendum requirements for important issues that Hoosiers are facing. And what I mean by that is every single major issue that divides the legislature right now has never gone before a popular vote in the state. Which means how can we be sure that your interests are actually being represented and expressed in the vote that you're taking down in the areas?
Thank you. Melissa Kauffman, District 21.
I believe my first bill I would champion to pass would be the judicial reform. We have a broken system that has become so expensive and so complicated that it has lost sight of the idea that it was meant to have justice for all. It was supposed to be fair, you were supposed to be able to get representation, and most people can't afford it. Being pro se, they've made it so complicated you can't represent yourself, and in some cases, certain courts have made it so that you can't represent yourself, even though that is supposed to be your right to do so. So I believe I would start with the judicial reform, which would also include term limits for judges. Too many of them are in there for decades, and they become complacent, they become lazy, they just are callous. They don't care after they've been there for years. So I think judicial reform would be my very first biggest priority.
Thank you. Leanne Smith.
The first bill I would champion would be a pay raise for all public school teachers and to ensure that all public schools are adequately funded and generously funded. And I happen to have gotten a really good public education courtesy of the state of Indiana, thanks to teachers like teachers in math and geometry like Jill Hassel and George Urban from Triton High School, and in calculus from Dr. Julian Geveritz at the Indiana Academy, and logic by Dr. Michael Dunn at Indiana University. And we need to make sure that those jobs, we have not been giving teachers the raises that they need and deserve, and we have fallen to the bottom in terms of teacher compensation in this country.
Thank you. I want to follow up on a point that Charlie Florance made, which is that Indiana does not have a true referendum. We sometimes see questions, public questions on our ballot, such as whether you want a local school to raise taxes in order to increase funding to that school system. We sometimes see a constitutional amendment on our ballots asking us to vote, but that of course was passed by 2 successive legislatures with an election in between. So it's not a referendum in the sense that people put an issue on the ballot and then vote to determine law, a form of direct democracy. I wonder just briefly if each of you could tell me whether or not you support moving toward a system of direct referendum in the state of Indiana, and we'll just go quickly down the line and yes and no, and if you want one sentence, that's fine too. So obviously we know that Charlie is a yes. Melissa?
Emphatically yes.
Melissa?
Definitely yes. I think we need those voices to be better heard.
Leanne?
I have mixed feelings about it. I prefer approval voting for single winner elections to be fair to third parties.
Tim?
1,000 times yes. The hurdle of having to have 2 legislatures in a row vote in favor of being able to put something up for the question is a huge hurdle for Indiana and for freedoms in Indiana, and we need to lower that bar to make it easier for some of these public questions that actually come to the ballot be decided without completely making it a tyranny of the majority. It needs to be easier.
And Heidi.
I would agree. I'd like to see those referendums because it's the one time that Hoosiers, that all of us get to voice what's important to us. So I support it wholeheartedly.
Okay, let's turn to the note cards. The next question will go first to you, Dr. Beidinger, and it is, what can be done to provide more affordable housing without compromising environment and safety standards?
Well, we have to talk about safe and healthy housing, first of all, in Indiana. We have a poor housing stock. We have families living here in South Bend, Mishawaka, who are actually homeless in their own homes. So in my role as a professor and a researcher at the University of Notre Dame, I work on lead poisoning prevention, and I'm often in people's homes, checking them to make sure that they are safe from lead. And I see homes that don't have running water. I see homes without electricity. I see homes that have broken doors, windows that don't work, and so forth. I know that we can have safe and affordable housing. We have to make it a priority. And we can do that. We can have more in Indiana. We're just constantly told, there's no money. Oh, it's not in the budget. Oh, there's going to be a fiscal impact. The truth of the matter is, we can have it when we make it a priority, and we can.
Thank you. Charlie Florance.
Those firsthand experiences are so powerful. I definitely have seen what you've seen, and not just in certain parts of South Bend, but all over the county. And, you know, from my perspective as a more independent libertarian candidate, I think that the taxing authority on rental housing almost forces the hand of some landlords to push rent rates higher than they should be. And my firm belief is we can redirect some of those tax dollars from property taxes to repairs and rent reductions. Now, beyond that, I would advocate strongly for removing the litigation caps on any defendant landlord whose unsafe house causes harm to the town. Right now, the state of Indiana caps damages awards in court. I think if we remove those for those cases, we'd see some differences.
Thank you. Melissa Kauffman.
Safe housing is very important. Making it affordable is also important, but I think safety first. And some of that comes back to holding landlords accountable for their properties. Right now, we do not have the ability or the, I guess, strong arm, if you want to call it, of taking some of our landlords that are most definitely and repeatedly violating health and safety codes. If they would get those homes up to safety, the rent, I believe, would come down because they wouldn't have the constant turnover and repairs with tenants damaging the house. Well, now I have to up my rent because I have to repair my house. Well, provide good housing, you get good tenants, you lower your expenses, you can lower your rent and keep it affordable. But we need to work on safety of rental properties.
Thank you. Leanne Smith.
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to holding landlords accountable. And, you know, I was a student at Indiana University of Bloomington, and I had some bad experiences with some very shady landlords in Bloomington. And the one thing that I learned is you cannot count on the state government to basically do anything about it. And so, you know, whether it's rental properties or it's employment, we need to enforce laws against white-collar crime and hold white-collar criminals accountable. And in some cases, that includes jail time.
Thank you. Tim Wesco.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead. I wanted to just add something to the conversation.
Feel free.
I just wanted to add, we've already brought up landlords a couple of times. My opponent and the legislators in Indiana have voted twice against renters' safety. They have voted against ensuring safe renter housing that the landlord does not have to disclose violations of their privacy, of their properties. The other one is that they voted against preventing the landlord from retaliating against the tenants who report a housing violation. So my opponent and the fellow legislators have passed this. They have protections for the landlords, but the person who's renting does not.
Tim Cotton?
Well, thank you for those points. So we got two large factors going on. So right now, for every 100 jobs that we have in Indiana, we have a shortage of about 20 people to fill those jobs. At the same time, we have a shortage of housing. We're pushing for more businesses to come in, more jobs, more jobs, more jobs, but at the same time, we don't have the people, infrastructure in place to support all those jobs. For every 100 low-income jobs that there are, there's 30% of those families are unable to find adequate housing. We're pushing businesses to come in, but we're not pushing for development of properties for residential areas, whether it's low income, middle class, high income. We're not pushing those areas, and we really need to be pushing for those areas that we need the housing before you need the extra businesses.
Thank you. We'll go to the next note card. It says, what is your opinion regarding voucher funding, that would be the school choice scholarship, for private school education? And why don't you also mention whether you support public school choice? Charlie Florance.
Well, my daughters sort of take advantage of it. They go to Kennedy and LaSalle, so even though they're part of the South Bend Community School System, which we're a huge fan of, by the way, the South Bend Community School personnel here today, thank you for what you're doing. The thing is, we get to choose which of those South Bend schools to send them to, and so naturally we chose the highest performing ones. And I have a feeling that every single parent goes through that same calculus when they decide where their kids go. And I definitely see the danger of having a voucher program that redirects funding from state schools that must take everyone and must teach everyone, and redirecting it to more selective private schools. But I certainly can't blame the parents and the educators who make the choices they are about where to send their students and where to devote their time.
So you would support the vouchers, but recognizing the potential danger or need to fund the public?
I wish I could tell you that I knew exactly where to point my flamethrower to the current laws that tie the hands of school districts and force them to either teach the unteachable or fix in 1 year what's taken 15 years to break. I think we're asking the impossible of our state school educators. And I think that the voucher system shows that just by selecting a smaller student population, they can just cherry pick results. So, I'm a fan of the voucher system because we're kind of exploiting the loophole here in South Bend Community Schools. We get to choose. But at the same time, I feel like there's got to be a way that we can free the hands of the educators that have to operate under those rules.
Melissa Kauffman.
I have to agree. It's a very hard decision to make, but I think it's a decision that should be left up to the parents. Parents are ultimately responsible for their children, raising their children, and deciding how best that should be done. And education is a big part of raising our children, and they should have the opportunity to send them wherever they choose. And if the school district they live in is not up to the standard that they want their child to have, they should have the ability to go somewhere else and take their tax dollars by voucher with them. You can't expect a parent to support a school that isn't providing what they're asking for if another school can. At the same time, we need to help our schools. We need to better pay our teachers. We need to find a way to help them raise the standards so that all schools can provide the same education.
Leon Smith.
I believe vouchers are a Trojan horse meant to defund the public school system. And I believe that we need to de-emphasize, we need to stop comparing public schools because I don't think it's a sensible thing to do in the way that we do, or that it's productive. I'm a big fan of a book called Weapons of Math Destruction by Melissa O'Neill, and I strongly recommend that everybody here read that. I think we need to get away from grading public schools. I think we need to take more of a Finnish model to make sure that any student can get a great public education at any public school. And we need to make sure that all public schools are generously funded to meet the student load that they have. I think that's what we need to emphasize, and I think we need to take a lot more epistemic responsibility when it comes to statistics and inductive logic, and we need to learn causal inference.
I guess. Stop yourself from going on to a lecture about causal inference. Tim Cotton.
Well, I think it might make a few people angry. So I have a platform of your kid, your choice. It actually is in support of 100% universal school choice, whether it's private school, public school, homeschool, religious school, whatever method works best for your family. You should have the option, if we are going to make the assumption and take your money and say, this money is for the kids, that money should follow for that child, for that education, regardless of what school that goes to. Public education does not own your children. It is your responsibility as parents to make sure that your child is brought up in the best way, best case possible for your scenario. It can't be 100% universal, outcome, but you have to make the best choices for your family.
And Heidi Beidinger.
So my answer is quite different. Public education is my space. I worked at South Bend Schools for 5 years, and I worked at Penn High School for 5 years. When vouchers were first announced, when Mitch Daniels was governor, the reason for those vouchers was to say to a mom and dad that if your child was in an F school and you didn't have the means to move them, you could move to another public school. Now that seems reasonable, right? It was never intended to supplant dollars for a wealthy family who was already paying for private schools. We have approximately $1 billion of public money paying for wealthy families who are already paying for that private school, That $1 billion will go a hell of a long way to what everybody here agrees. Let's give teachers an increase. We know how to do education. We have examples of awesome public education in this community, and we need to invest in it.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, can I tag on there?
30 seconds.
So in Indiana, 50% of our state budget is dedicated to education. 50%. So when we dedicate half of our state budget to education, we give that money to schools. It is the schools deciding what they're doing with that funding. Those schools do not own the children or own the rights to those dollars. The parents have to be able to make a choice that best accomplishes their goal for their children.
Can I do a rebuttal? Thank you. So of course I'm going to say something totally different. These are public dollars and they should go to public education, period. And yes, when my opponent Dale Devon will tell you that 50% of the state budget goes to public education, what they don't tell you are all of the carve-outs that are in that piece of the pie. It doesn't all go to public education, you guys. Look it up. It does not all go to education. To your point of that families get to choose, absolutely. They can choose to send to a public school, a private school, a faith-based school. They can choose to do homeschool. But public dollars go to public education.
Can I tie the two of them together for just a second?
Yes, you sort of rebuttal.
If you take both of those ideas and put them together, I think the voucher system should have some limitations as far as the financial backing goes. If you are wealthy enough to pay for it, the same as we do with other programs, qualify for it. If you don't qualify, you pay for it. Send your child where you choose, but pay for it. If you are a parent who is a single parent, you're doing the best you can, and you're trying to do the best education, let them qualify to use their tax dollars through the voucher to send their child where they want.
And just so we're clear, you can now be a family earning up to $230,000 and get money to send your child where you want.
Unacceptable.
Continuing on with education, and that amount has increased each session. So education has been a hot button topic issue with changes already implemented regarding specific proposed policies such as sexual orientation or race orientation bans. I think in terms of what you talk about in the classroom. Changes to diplomas, $1 charter school buys, teacher salary changes. Where do you stand on the concern of our educational freedom, and how do you respond to the growing parents' rights movement? So that's a lot there in one note card. There are a lot of things going on. So if you want to pick out one or two of those things and talk about your sort of larger philosophy of who should decide, like is the legislature overstepping here? Are these good policies and changes? We will start with you, Melissa Kauffman.
I will most definitely agree that the legislator is overstepping their bounds. They have no business deciding what a parent chooses to teach their child. I believe education was meant to prepare the child for their adult life, not to change where they are as a child. Certain areas of sex education, by all means, should be shared as part of the health class. But when we start going into areas that a child of that age is not mature enough to be making those decisions, our educators should not be teaching it. Let's get back to math, science, social studies. What happened to teaching our children how to balance a checkbook? We don't do that anymore. We don't want to teach any of the basics where we used to be. Let's get back to that and stop stepping into realms we don't belong. Leave parents to make those choices for themselves.
Dan Smith.
Well, I think there's a lot of disinformation about what's actually going on right now. And I also would say that, children are human beings and their parents don't own them. So, they have their own rights independent of their parents as well. And yeah, I like math education. I also like LGBTQ rights. And honestly, one of my big ideas in math education is to teach everybody how to enumerate the rational numbers. So like you can find 1/2 in this tree, but not 2/4, right? So all the fractions, all the rational numbers, so the Stern-Brokow tree. And anyway, the magic behind the Stern-Brokow tree is it's generated using addition the wrong way. So yeah, adding fractions the wrong way is not addition, but it's useful, and that's an LGBTQ theme I'm happy to get behind.
Tim Cotton.
All right, so I'm going to pull out the libertarian trope here. Let the free market decide. So with your child, your choice, and being able to choose where your child is going to school, if you have local control of education instead of state mandated goals or whatever you want to go into, if you have local control of education and a particular school teaches X, Y, and Z, If that is not acceptable to the majority of the parents of that family, that school is going to have a hard time because those tax dollars and those children are going to move to different schools. If a local school wants to teach a curriculum that is, for lack of better words, heavy on woke, then that is a business decision and a business model that they need to stand behind. But if parents don't want that for their children, they should have the option to be able to go somewhere else.
Thank you. Heidi Beidinger.
So during my time at Penn High School, I wrote a grant for $1.5 million. And it was all about, the theme was that every child would be known well by at least one adult in the building. Our graduation rate at that time was 74%. That was 2007. In 5 years, that graduation rate was 96.1%. Let that sink in for a minute. We moved that needle in a big, big way. It was so exciting. We invested in teachers' professional development. We invested in the students. We invested in teacher leaders. We know how to do public education. And I'll tell you what, we need to get the legislators out of the classroom. Let the experts do what they do. The conversation about where parents can send their child to school, that's a separate issue. But the public schools allow teachers to do what they do. It's the same thing with the doctors, right? Let the doctors do the doctoring, let the teachers do the teaching.
Charlie Florance.
It'll be refreshing to see some legislators with some real expertise.
I agree.
I think that no knowledge is off limits. And the connectivity we have now with the internet makes that a stark reality, whether you're prepared for that or not. I also believe that the temptation to interfere with how other people teach is very strong. And I think you see it. You see how pervasive it is at the state legislature. From my perspective, the legislature, beyond very broad strokes of setting standards for reading,